What's up guys, hope you're doing well. Today I wanted to make a very simple video about the new dietary guidelines for Americans, and I'm going to talk about this table right here due to the fact that the original document is not available currently. So I want to talk about the major updates. Just to clarify my expertise on the matter, I'm a food scientist. I have my bachelor's degree, and this year I'm starting my doctorate. And I have a couple of, publications. Some of them are still on press, the other ones are published. So bear that in mind. I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor. I just want to give my 2 cents on the matter based on what I have researched and the conclusions I have come to. So let's begin. First of all, avoid foods that are highly processed, packaged, or ready to eat. Avoid other foods that are salty or sweet. So, I disagree with this completely because the processing of something doesn't equate lower nutrient density or higher calorie content. So, when I mean nutrient, I meant specifically micronutrient density. What I mean by this is stuff like canned foods, for example, canned legumes like beans, peas, lentils, corn, beetroot, carrots, salads. Those are canned foods. Tuna, anchovies. Those are canned foods. So they're technically highly processed, but they're not bad for you. They're actually quite good for you. They have their own, benefits to your health. The same goes with packaged foods. They're technically packaged foods as well. And in some other cases, for example, packaged foods might actually be preferable to their non-packaged counterpart, like mainly nuts and seeds, due to the fact that most packaged foods that are high in lipids come in what is called a tri-lamination, basically, which is 3 layers of polyethylene, usually aluminum, and polyethylene again, and that works as a barrier to prevent oxygen and light getting into the high lipid content food, for example peanuts, which can start lipid oxidation chains, which result in compounds that are associated with cancer to basically generate based off the lipids due to the oxidation process or free radicals or whatever. So in most cases, packaged foods are preferable to their non-packaged or the type you buy in bulk type of foods, counterpart kind of. And then you have on the other side frozen vegetables, for example. Those are technically processed as well because all food is processed to some degree, which again, is really stupid. Whole milk is technically highly processed, like UHT milk, because they have the raw milk, they extract the fat, so they have like 100% skim milk and like 0% milk it would be. And you have the cream on the other side, and they reintegrate part of the fat back into the milk product. Then you have whole milk, which is 3%. Then you have the 2% milk. I think it's 1% as well, and 0%. And then you have the cream as well. So if you really think about, and then of course it goes to a very high temperature process, 121 degrees Celsius approximately, or even higher, for a couple of seconds to basically inactivate enzymes and make it, last longer on the shelf. So really bear that in mind. So technically, milk, which is, I would say, really good for you, unless you have, like lactose intolerance, or also lactose-free milk, which might be good for you, is even more processed because it goes through an enzyme process to degrade the lactose in the milk. So with that aside, this just goes to show that just because something is processed doesn't mean it's bad for you, or just because something is packaged as well. So that's on one side. And then ready-to-eat foods. Canned foods are technically ready to eat. You just, unless you buy them with salt, in which case they're totally ready to eat. If you buy like no sodium added to the product, you open the can, put it on a bowl, or to a recipe, and they're ready to eat. You don't have to do any extra preparation. So you can just eat it straight off the can. Also, if I grab a protein shake, which, I mean, how many of you are going to tell me that a protein shake is unhealthy? I grab a protein shake. then I apply UHT treatment to it, and I leave it on a supermarket shelf, it's technically a ready-to-eat food. Does that mean it's bad for you? No. It's a protein shake. It's normal. So again, don't look at food from an aesthetic viewpoint or focus on the, let's just say, philosophical aspects of a food item, like is it natural or not, is it processed or not. Instead of doing that, look towards the nutrient profile, the micronutrient content, possible contaminants. Like for example, you can look at canned fish and say, hey, beware of the heavy metal, like contamination. Make sure the brand that you're buying matches with the requirements, that it has the appropriate certifications, and so on and so forth. So that's on one side. Then avoid other foods that are salty or sweet. Yes, for the general population, but if you know a thing or two about nutrition, you know that this is a little bit misleading, because there are some foods that are healthy that are salty. Again, canned foods. Like they're the perfect example to debunk this whole notion. Canned foods or fermented products, like or stuff that is in brine, like pickles, for example. Those are salty foods. Or in terms of sweet foods, fruit juices. I mean, don't get me wrong, fruit juices have their problem with calorie density. I'm trying to think of like other, like foods, but in general, you're going to see that just because something is sweet or salty doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad for you. As long as you intake adequate amounts, you have a good eating habits, there's not going to be an issue. Now, I do get why they have this recommendation here, and that is because when they say salty or sweet foods, they mean basically chips, which are very high in carbs, very high in fat, very low in protein, very palatable kind of foods. And when they mean sweet, they mean stuff like ice cream or candy and stuff like that, which they should have just said, hey, don't eat this specific products, but they generalized. What they mean is that don't eat candy, don't eat chips, which I think is pretty clear cut. So that's on one thing. Then avoid sugar sweetened beverages. Speaking of the fruit juice, just because something is sugar sweetened doesn't mean it's bad for you. Although I agree in the sense that you shouldn't drink empty calories. If you are going to drink orange juice, better eat an orange because it has the fiber, and it's going to lower the insulin response you're going to get from the sugar in the orange, and at the same time it's going to satiate you with less calories. So don't drink your calories, basically. But there's nothing wrong inherently with a Coke or a orange juice. It's just the specific context of the general population. Drinking your calories is a very bad idea. The same goes with coffees, okay? So if you go to a coffee shop and you buy like a coffee with cream, for example, but you add no sugar, you're still drinking your calories because you're adding the fat, you're adding the cream. So, or bulletproof coffee for those keto dieters out there. You're still drinking your calories. Don't do that. It's not a sugar thing, it's a calorie thing. So that's on one aspect. Then when it says limit added sugars to no more than 10 grams per meal, and in food, 5 in grains, 2.5 in dairy. Your body doesn't differentiate chemically from added sugar and naturally occurring sugar. So if you add sugar to your coffee, or you add honey to your coffee, your body's not going to be able to tell the difference. If I add high fructose corn syrup, honey, and cane sugar, there's again not going to be a difference as long as the calories remain the same. So it is good that you limit added sugars, just because that's going to prevent you from eating more directly. But it's nothing wrong inherently with added sugars. Your body doesn't tell the difference. So I want to make that very clear. Then no added sugars from birth through 10 years of age. I partly agree in terms of your child's diet shouldn't consist mainly of added sugars if you take it to the extreme. But saying no added sugars. Like, your kid is not going to internally combust if you give them a Coke, okay, or orange juice or whatever, okay, because again, your body doesn't distinguish between added sugars and yeah, added sugars and naturally occurring sugars. If I give you oat milk, for example, like homemade oat milk, your body has amylase in your mouth, and that's going to degrade the starch from the oat milk into glucose, which is a simple sugar. So it's very stupid. It's very stupid. So also, if your kid drinks milk, he's drinking a simple sugar, which is lactose. It really doesn't make sense from an objective standpoint. I would say avoid giving, like very high calorie, very high sugar foods to your kids. I do think there's a benefit, a huge benefit actually, to not getting your kid accustomed to consuming overly sweet food, and just keeping it as an occasional treat. That's the way to do it. But no added sugars is, I think, moronic. So then it says limit foods and beverages that include artificial flavors, petroleum-based dyes, artificial preservatives, and low-calorie non-nutritive sweeteners. So I'm totally against this. I'm totally against this, and not because I want to be a contrarian. It's just that um, this is an argument, a naturalistic argument of, oh, this is artificial, this comes from petroleum, or this comes from microbes, for example, like biotechnological processes, or this is synthesized in a lab, therefore it's bad for you. That's fucking stupid. That's fucking stupid. You have to look at the compound itself, not the process behind it. That's the same argument as when people say, "Oh well, but seed oils are usually extracted, like the remainders, they're extracted with hexane, so that's terrible for you." You have to look at if any dangerous compound is at the end of the product, which in the case of seed oils, they get evaporated. Okay, they go through a deodorization phase, which eliminates the traces, not even like significant amounts, or like traces of hexane. So at the end, the end product doesn't have any type of hexane on it. So it's not bad for you. It's just an oil. Okay, it's fatty acids. The same goes here. Just because something is petroleum based doesn't mean it's going to be bad for you. Like if I manage to extract the same compound for a plant, hypothetically, does that mean that it's out of nowhere evil and bad for me? Sorry, does that mean that it's no longer evil or bad for me? No, it's the same compound. Well, the same goes here. Just because something comes from petroleum doesn't mean that it's going to be harmful for you, as long as the compound has been thoroughly studied and it shows that no adverse side effects are present in the doses used in the product. There's this thing called non-observable adverse effect level, which then gets divided by a safety factor, and that's the amount that you can see in foods. So you have a range there. For example, for non-nutritive sweeteners like aspartame, you have, I think it's 40 milligrams per kilogram per day. So that's what you can intake per day, but that's the divided by the safety factor number, the ADI. But in reality, you can probably intake way more than that and you're going to be just fine. It's just that the safety factor is there to overly make sure that nothing bad's going to happen. So you have to look at things through toxicology and the effect and the doses that create those effects, and not just look at it surface level, be like aesthetically, be like, oh, this is not natural, I'm naturalistic, so therefore this is bad. You have to look at the compound itself. So artificial flavors, if I take vanillin from synthesized in a lab and I take vanillin from the plant, they're the same. Why would that be, any type of issue if I synthesize in a lab or I extract it from plant? It doesn't make sense that one would be better than the other just because of the origin. If they, like both, if neither has like a contaminant or neither had any other like extra compound that may cause any adverse effect, then both of them should be fine, like equal. The same goes with petroleum-based dyes. One of the most common antioxidants in the food industry is BHT, which is not bad for you. It has as much evidence, I would say, as aspartame to show that it has no effect on health. And is very potent and is commonly used in vegetable oils, mayos, I think butter as well, margarines. So keep that in mind. Then artificial preservatives. There's no evidence to show that artificial preservatives are bad for you, contrary to natural preservatives. It's just the same. Like if I synthesize citric acid and I lower the pH of a certain product so it doesn't develop, microorganisms, and I take the same citric acid from an orange or a lemon, they both have the same effect. They both are the same compound, but one is artificial, the other one is natural. Why would that be bad? Again, it doesn't make sense. And even if we were talking about different compounds, it doesn't make sense either, because you have to look at the compound and the effects the specific compound has on your health. You can't just generalize and say all artificial preservatives are bad for you. Then I made a whole video on the low-calorie, non-nutritive sweeteners, which is going to be on the other channel. And once it's up, I'm going to leave you with the link so you can watch the video. Prioritize fiber-rich whole grains. I agree, it's fine. It's not going to be that much of a difference. It's going to help, but keep in mind you just don't eat white rice and that's it. Usually combine it with protein or with legumes or with vegetables. So you're still going to get your fiber and you're still going to slow down the digestion even if you eat, like refined grains, significantly reduce highly processed refined carbohydrates. Again, the same thing. Just because something is processed doesn't mean it's inherently bad. Again, the difference between whole grains and the refined grains is negligible in terms of the fiber content, especially if you apply it in the context of a proper diet. So, really stupid. Incorporate healthy fats from whole foods such as meats, poultry, eggs, seafood, whatever. The only caveat, or not caveat, disagreement I have is that didn't include vegetable oils. Probably because the RFK Jr. is like a gym bro, so he probably is into the whole anti-seed oil agenda, which I mean, I'm totally against that. I think that seed oils are not like great in the sense of they're not magical, but they're not bad either. They're just there. They're neutral in any case. In some cases, it might even be beneficial and it might even be preferable over animal fats, especially fats like pork, mainly due to the fact that pork is high in the omega-6 animal version, which is arachidonic acid. Meanwhile, vegetable sources of omega-6 are in linoleic acid, and linoleic acid has to go through an enzymatic process to get to arachidonic acid, and that process is not substrate mediated, it's demand mediated. So you can regulate the production of arachidonic acid, and if you just intake arachidonic acid, then it's not limited by the conversion process it has to go through in the case of linoleic. So you're going to see more of the bad side effects of having a poor omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. So that's one aspect I wanted to point out. But I think that overall it's fine. What I find, I would say, contradictory is the fact that they tell you to limit your saturated fat, but then they tell you to incorporate meat and eggs, which is a little bit counterintuitive. Get fat from meats, which are high in saturated fat, but limit your saturated fat intake. How does that work? I think, honestly, that this is just they want to promote more meat consumption, which is fine by me. I'm not against meat consumption. I do think that you should prefer leaner cuts because of the saturated fat content, and that's it. And the eggs, as long as you're not eating 12 eggs a day, you're going to be just fine. The same goes with cheeses, for example, or full-fat dairy. as long as you don't overly consume them and have adequate amounts and that rotate. So like one day you eat, like yogurt, the other day you eat like a slice of cheese, the other day you get some, like some steak, some other day you get some chicken thighs. I think that's fine as long as you rotate and don't overly depend on animal products to get your protein and your fats. The rest, it's fine, especially on the seafood aspect. If you're not getting enough seafood, I recommend you get a omega-3 supplement, be it algae based or fish oil based. It's going to be fine. Don't buy the alpha-linolenic acid supplements. Those don't work because of the conversion rate, which is dog shit. So yeah. Then let's go into the next one, which says prioritize protein foods at every meal. 100% agree. Consume a variety of protein foods. Yeah, I totally agree with that. The only thing I would say is choose plant protein over animal protein, because unless you're a starving child in Africa, protein bioavailability is not going to be a concern for the general population, due to the fact that you're already eating probably enough protein for yourself. I'd say that plant protein is better in terms of cost. For example, you can get a 2-pound bag of lentils for $1.50 or something like that, or even less, for cents even, if you find the right price. So you can get a lot of protein for very cheap with plant protein, plant sources of protein, and as long as you combine, like cereals with legumes, or you add some nutritional yeast to your stuff. Vital wheat gluten, for example, if you mix it with like yeast or with soy flour, you're going to complete the amino acid profile. And the vital wheat gluten is basically a protein concentrate. It's almost an isolate. It's 80% protein. So you can make some really cool stuff with gluten. I highly recommend it. And it's very cheap compared to buying meat. So in that regard, also tofu, textured soy proteins, like the cheapest high protein source you'll ever find. You just have to learn to cook it properly, because that's the only downside. But outside of that, it's really good. Beans as well. You're going to get some benefit from beans. Just make sure to cook it properly and to soak it as well, like the Mormons do. So that's on that point. And then the protein recommendation, I think is great. That's the same recommendation for athletes. So I think that higher protein intakes, for those of you, give me a second, my cat is here, going to. So basically, in terms of the protein consumption, I think that it's great. There's this thing I made a video on the other channel called the protein leverage hypothesis, which postulates that protein intake or protein calorie intake leverages calorie consumption, like total calorie consumption, way more than non-protein energy or non-protein calories. So that means that the higher your protein intake, the more satiation you're going to feel per calorie, thus down-regulating the amount of calories you consume. So I think that this works great for the general population. If you are someone that needs to gain weight, then reducing the protein intake might actually be a good idea. At least per meal. Like you can get a high protein intake throughout the day, but per meal you want to reduce it, or eat it at the end. Basically, eat the non-protein energy sources first, then the protein sources. Finally, they provide the pyramid, which, in full honesty, I don't like, because it's not intuitive. I think it's good as a marketing tool, because everyone was talking about, oh, they inverted the pyramid, like just like in South Park, which I think it's great to create, like to spread the word, or to leave an impact, but not in a practical sense. People can barely read nowadays. Like, have you seen Twitter? Like, people are spamming grok, is this real? They don't do research, they don't put in any type of work. So that pyramid scheme was already, or graphic was already very difficult to work with when people were, let's just say, sentient in the 70s with the food pyramid. Now it's going to be even more difficult, because people are very stupid nowadays. I think the MyPlate format was a little bit better, although it has its issues. So those are the main points I wanted to talk about in this video. And I want to also add an extra food for thought, and that is that a lot of these guidelines try to get you to eat healthier and to help regulate, like non-transmissible chronic diseases, mainly obesity and cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and so on and so forth. What I think they should be focusing more on is doing exercise. That's going to be the main game changer. Like, a lot of people like to point out at a graphic and say, oh, look, seed oil consumption raised and cardiovascular disease went up as well. And obesity, it all correlates with the seed oil. And what you have to think about is that it's not the seed oils, because the outcome don't show that, is the change in lifestyle. Currently, we are not moving as much as we did before. We don't go out for walks. We spend a lot of time sitting on our asses doing nothing, and or being on our computers to work all day. You have an office job, and that is I would say, the main culprit behind obesity and all of the problems we're having today. Because think about it, in the 50s, things were not a lot better in terms of nutrition. In fact, they have gotten better over time in terms of the food science and more. And I think it's way likelier that science has advanced in terms of the nutritional knowledge, and the thing that has gone backwards is our activity levels, which you can have a very terrible diet like the Maasai, the carnivore tribe, but as long as you have enough activity, you're going to have really good blood markers. So you can't, let's just say, outtrain a bad diet long term. Let's just say, like, in terms of, if you chronically are deficient in nutrients, you're not going to be able to make up for that in exercise. But I think that in terms of the main driving factor in non-transmissible chronic diseases is the lack of exercise. So I think that instead of worrying about artificial dyes, organic, non-organic, low-calorie sweetener, oh my God, this has soy, this has gluten, this has saturated fat. Instead of worrying too much about that, focus more on doing more activity. And if you're already doing more activity, as you probably are in the channel, then you can start worrying about the smaller things. Start with, the main culprit, which is reducing saturated fat intakes. I'm not telling you to avoid animal products, just avoid over consuming saturated fat. In fact, you can get high saturated fat intakes from plant foods as well. If you intake palm oil or coconut oil, you're going to also get high saturated fat intakes. So I'd say that limit saturated fat. Then you can worry about your, let's just say, your protein sources and fiber. And then after all of that, you can start worrying about more nitty-gritty stuff. And also the vitamins, I almost forgot. Reduce saturated fat, get enough vitamins, then you can worry about protein and fiber. Then you can move on to more smaller things. But instead of worrying about something just because it doesn't sound right or doesn't feel right, try doing your own research and actually reading the studies and actually understanding the topics behind them. And then you're going to be able to give an informed opinion on, for example, artificial sweeteners, on added sugars, stuff like that. So that's what I have to say for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave me your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching.